Police in Cambodia have used stun batons on clothes workers protesting for better wages. At least 23 were wounded. Around 3,000 staff, mostly women, blocked a road outside their factory, which makes clothes for sportswear giant Nike. Sreeram Chaulia is a professor and dean of Jindal School of International Affairs, and he joins me now. Now, the factory's union leader says workers have been staging protests for a week, but it took violence to get their voices heard. Why is that, do you think?
Bill, we are witnessing a state of increasing desperation of working people around the world, especially in Asia, in countries like Cambodia, and of course the most infamous one being Bangladesh, where people are being pushed to the edge through cruel and inhumane practices in industrial sites. And this is all serving a larger multinational enterprise, a lot of which is based in the Western world. So the supply chain, the global supply chain, which is providing cheap clothes and other items for middle-class consumers in the Western world, is basically one where at the bottom you have this kind of extreme brutality and violence that's being meted out to workers. And so they're being squeezed, literally, in the form of, like a pincer. From all sides, the workers have been squeezed, and therefore they have to resort to these extreme measures. So I wouldn't blame them entirely for what is happening. Of course, militant unionism and so on is also a problem in its own right. But in these cases, in the apparel industry, we've seen in Bangladesh, we're seeing it in Cambodia, there's a race to the bottom. States are trying to side with multinational corporations against their own people. And this is a form of exploitation that had been predicted long ago by theoreticians, but we are seeing it in front of our eyes. It's globalization's worst phase.
And so who should be brought to account for the way these workers are treated? Is it the factory operators themselves or the clothes brands that contract the factories to make their garments?
I would say it's a collective responsibility. These contractors and subcontractors are eventually earning their keep through being given these deals from Western headquarters. So be it Sweden or be it London or Paris or New York, this is where the source of this exploitative structure is emanating from. And the global brands are trying to wash their hands of it by saying, it's the responsibility of the local authorities and we don't know who's ultimately making these clothes for us or these shoes for us. The fact is, even in the 1990s when we had the sweatshops campaign against some of these Western apparel and accessory brands, they were trying to wash their hands of any responsibility. But the fact is, we need to push the case for criminal responsibility of many of these Western brands which are trying to say that it's none of our business. The point is, it is because of you and your contracts this entire cycle of violence and repression has been unleashed.
Now, a lot of these factories are in predominantly Muslim nations. Are workers' conditions affecting the image of the West, which of course they're working for?
Well, it's complicated because in the absence of these corporations, they would also be in exploitative labor conditions in domestic industries and factories. So urbanization and industrialization in these countries, it has been a dehumanizing process. But what is happening is that because of the association with global brands, there is a mass unrest in the societies against being used as doormats and as sources of cheap labor. The workers themselves often are not even aware of these global brands for whom they are making these products. So there is a conspiracy of silence involved in this whole chain of exploitation.
But just briefly, Sreeram, you and I, aren't we responsible? We are consumers, we want affordable clothes, and of course not many people think about those who actually make them. Do you think that attitude will ever change?
Well, I think consumer activism has been there in the Western societies, but because of the economic crisis, the margins matter. So while Gap and Walmart are not even willing to invest in the safety of workers who are producing these things for them in faraway lands, the buyers of these Gap and Walmart are also those people who want to, sell on these 10 cents and 5 cents. So there is a kind of, that's what I'm saying, it's an exploitative structure at the core of which you have to also think about the economic crisis within the Western world and how people are finding it hard to make their ends meet. So the only ones who are profiting out of these are the Western multinational corporations and nobody else. Neither the workers in Bangladesh or in other countries in Asia, nor are actually the consumers in the West, who themselves are getting a raw deal out of their lives because of the continued economic crisis.
Sreeram, thank you very much indeed for your thoughts on this. Sreeram Chaulia, Professor and Dean of Jindal School of International Affairs, live on RT.